Welcome back to yet another Let's Talk edition of BTP Podcast. As always, I am joined by Dan. How's it going, dude?
Hey, hey there, my man, buddy. How's it going? Glad to be here with you for another great Let's Talk edition. Golf all the time, but we're doing our best.
That's awesome, man. It's I like that you like it, and I like that you're hustling all day long. It's awesome. How's the life going? Like the business and the life.
For now, things are quite fine on the business side, and we are doing our very best to somehow create basically new channels of income and new sources of income for our businesses. Obviously, now things are a little bit hectic in the Middle East, so we have to actually take a lot of our stocks and move it to other parts of the world where we can invest with higher levels of certainty as well as assurance. I'm currently actually, as of now, as we're recording this podcast, I'm currently in Moscow, Russia. And for now, things are quite fine. On the business side, of course, we have to take into consideration the changes in global politics and how all of the new decisions made by basically world leaders are going to affect basically the world economies. We are approaching the supposedly forecasted basically economic depression that we're supposed to experience in the coming year, probably 2021. And we'll see about that. For now, we're ready for all the possible changes in the circumstances as well as the economic climate around the world, and things are pretty fine.
Great. Okay, so that's good to hear that you're preparing for a freaking crash, which is I think is bound to happen one way or the other. Maybe the timing would not be perfectly.
Well, they say it's cyclical, and it's not necessarily because of the change in geopolitics. It's like a cyclical thing that happens every 18 to 20 years. We'll see. I'm not sure quite if it's true or not, but obviously, if you're working basically in business, then you have to have plans. And as you know, my strategy in business, it's to make the plan B before plan A. So we're going to have to work hard to prepare ourselves in case things somehow don't pan out as we thought it would. And this is going to hopefully give us a great chance to prepare ourselves.
Okay, so actually today's topic is not too irrelevant. It's actually quite relevant to the subject, not the economy of it, but preparing and potential downfalls and whatnot. So what we want to talk about is how to build essentially emotional resilience against stress and setbacks in general, stressful situations. So you have a bad day, you have a bad events that happened in your life, bad couple of days, bad month, bad year, whatever. Maybe you lost your stocks, maybe they went down, as we were talking about. Whatever happened, like some major setback that upsets people. Now, how do you build your emotional resilience so that you don't get affected by it, in that you can still function? Now, we're going to talk about it in depth, but one of the things I want to ask you right off the bat is that what is emotional resilience? What are we talking about here? What is that in a nutshell?
Very good question, Pujix. Emotional resilience basically is very much like physical resilience, in that if you look at someone who is physically fit, when we say like somebody's physically fit, what we're really saying is this person has reached a level of physical fitness that he can put up with a lot more physical stress than the average person, be it running a lot longer, a lot faster, be it having a lot of endurance when it comes to certain activities, or being able to lift more weight or carry more stuff. Ultimately, emotional resilience is the exact same thing, only when it comes to things that are psychological in nature and they can concern your feelings, emotions, and thoughts. And what it really says is, if you are emotionally resilient, you do not feel the pain that might cause other people to feel pain in certain situations. For example, let's say that you are going to the gym, as I do, and let's say that you go to the gym almost every day, and you somehow are practicing and you're lifting different types of weight. Once you, let's say, start, let's say, the bench press for, I don't know, let's say you start with 40 pounds, for example, right? Mm-hmm. And you start the process. At first, if you've never done it before, even 40 pounds seems like a lot. Like, oh my gosh, I got to push this one, right? Like you can actually have injury or have some difficulty afterwards. You can't even like move your hand properly. I've seen a lot of amateurs do that. Like they go to the gym for a few weeks and they have serious trouble walking around, just doing your daily stuff, because the body's adjusting basically with the process. And on the other hand, you see that like this, this guy on the other side who's been, going to the gym for years and years, and This guy can lift, for example, 200 pounds without any problem, like not even breaking a sweat. And that is the difference between emotional resilience, which applies to, psychology, in that you could be facing with so much more severe problems that put a lot of burden on your shoulder without even feeling it, while simultaneously somebody else could be, really pissed off because of some little comment that somebody left on his or her social media account, right? Ultimately, they say the size of your mental strength is determined by how easily you get disturbed by the news you hear. And the smaller the problem, basically, that makes you upset or bothered, the less strength you have emotionally. And because of this, you have to focus your attention on knowing that you can build emotional resilience by becoming someone who can deal with problems and issues that make other people upset. If somebody's truly emotionally resilient and strong, then you can somehow make an assumption about this person that this person can tolerate a lot of the situations where other people just get extremely upset, right? And that is what I mean by emotional resilience. For example, think about simple things that could make people really upset. Things like losses, failures, rejections, which happen all the time, for example, in business. If you are a newbie, let's say, you probably will you perhaps even lose your sleep over losing one client after, for example, a couple months of starting your business. But if you've been in this for like many years, you don't even care. It doesn't even get registered, that you somehow lost a key client, because what, we're going to make another one very soon. No problem. Mm-hmm. So the same thing applies to every other area of life. Whether it's, the difficulty, whether it's uncertainty, how well can you tolerate uncertainty? Because, you cannot predict everything. You cannot, somehow know how everything will pan out. So if you have the ability to tolerate uncertainty and to withstand rejection, failure, and setbacks without losing your emotional, well-being, then you're emotionally resilient. And of course, to the degree to which you can do so, you are more and more emotionally resilient.
Okay, that's actually a pretty good roundup. And now I understand what you mean. And what I always obsessed about personally, and perhaps I've seen others do so, obsess about it, is, shit hits the fan at some point. It'll happen. We all know.
Exactly.
And it has happened in our lives. Now, it's okay that happens, and I personally am at the place that I could accept it as having happened. Whatever, it keeps happening. It's okay. Like, I get it. Now, what I really want to get at here is that I still don't want to be stopped by this phenomenon, meaning I don't want to be jammed in my system. I don't want to hang, if you will, like old computers, we would say, like computers hang. Now, I want to still be able to function. Now, I want to go forward. I want to, if the problem it's a problem that needs fixing, I want to be able to actually act and fix the problem. I want to be able to, if it's about moving on, I want to be able to move on to the next thing, so I'm not halted, not wasting time. Now, I suppose if you have the emotional resilience, you're less affected by the bad phenomena. So you're more equipped to do just that. Is that's correct? I get it from your exactly. Now, how do we get there? It's a big question. How do I keep going without being affected by the emotional component of it?
Another great question. So true. You see, as we already defined what it means to be emotionally resilient, now let's talk about how to get there. First and foremost, some people, just genetically are like born that way. I'm sure we all know someone who's just always cool and chill, no matter what happens. This guy tends to be like quite relaxed, and nothing really bothers this person so much. Now, I really believe that for most of us, however, we have to work on it. And the way to go about doing it is to understand that emotional resilience requires you to look at the world differently than the average person. Because we have basically not been taught the skills and the mental attitudes required to become emotionally resilient. Because unfortunately, in the world, we live in a world where we are always in the constant state of, vigilance. What's happening? What's the news? Oh, we're going to have some problems. Because, the world, and particularly the media, revolves around negativity. And that's exactly what, it's designed to do. Because when you're upset and when you're negative all the time, then you'll be a great consumer. So, because of that, we have to understand that in order to build true emotional resilience, we have to take a step back and develop what we call the philosopher's attitude towards life. Because ultimately, whenever we get upset about anything, let's say, for example, right now, I don't know, you just heard a very bad news. Let's say your business just went bankrupt. Let's say you lost a key client. Let's say your partner just left you. You just got a divorce. Maybe something happened to your children. You just heard of very, very bad news right now. And the typical reaction, of course, is to feel bad. And what does it really mean? From an NLP point of view, when you're feeling bad, what it really is happening is you receive some sort of information from the outside world. Could be anything. Could be the fact that you just got a serious problem with your health or some problem with your business. You hear that info. That's like a piece of information. That's it. Nothing more than that. Like, for example, you just lost your business. Now, here, the way you define this event to yourself, what Dr. Sullivan called your self-explanatory style, basically, determines exactly how you feel. So, for example, to give you a great example here, let's say that you just lost a client. And this client, of course, was not a very good client from the beginning. From the get-go, he was talking about the prices. He was asking for a lot of discounts, and he wasn't even on time on the payment. And he didn't even really enjoy working with this guy. But, of course, you needed the money. And then the client finally just tells you, like, sorry, man, I'm not going to do business with you at all. Just forget about the project. Just cancel, right? Now, at this moment, as an entrepreneur, you can explain this piece of information in a variety of different ways, each of which will make you feel very differently. For example, you could say, oh, my gosh, I spent all of that time on this client tolerating this friggin' phone call and the meetings and the emails and the back and forth for about 2 months. And now he says he doesn't want to work with me. I lost 2 months and I don't even have the money right now. You feel what emotions do you feel right now? Anger, hatred, negativity, hopelessness, and a lot of other negative emotions. Now, let's just imagine you can explain the exact same situation to yourself very differently. You can say, well, finally, I'm pretty sure that I will never have to put up with the bullshit of this client ever again. From the very get-go, I kind of knew this guy was some serious business. And now I'm even, more certain that this guy probably is not even a good person. So now I've just freed up my time. Not only I will not work with him, I will also learn a lesson that taught me to never work with anyone like him ever again in the future. So not only I freed up my time and now I'm a happy person, I actually learned a great lesson that allows me to avoid such pitfalls in the future. Now, how do you feel here? Well, of course, if you really need the money, you probably still feel some sort of, pain, but this is going to make it a lot easier to tolerate than the first case, right? And the same thing applies to every other area of life. The way you define things to yourself ultimately determines how you feel. Let's say, for example, a client, let's say, tells you, rejects your offer. You just simply send a message, the client rejects your offer. And at that time, basically, you can define this like, I got rejected. What does it mean? Again, you can define it for yourself. It means that probably I'm a piece of shit. And what does that mean? It means that probably I'm worthless. And then how do you feel? Very terrible, because nobody wants to feel like they're worthless, right? On the other hand, once a rejection happens and you define like, I just got rejected. What does that mean? It means that the other person doesn't like me. What does that mean? It means that based upon his or her value, I'm not the kind of person that I would have value for him or her. Now, does that mean that I am worthless? No, this is his or her perspective. If he or she doesn't like me, that's his or her problem. And I know that I have value, so I'm going to move on to somebody else. The exact same situation triggered an emotion of depression, hatred, and negativity in one person, while for the other person, he didn't even feel it. It's like, okay, just move on to the next. Let's go. And this is what I call by emotional resilience, because unlike physical, strength, which requires you to actually push things, emotional resilience is mainly about practicing the art of explaining things to yourself differently than most people. Because unfortunately, most of us, we haven't been taught how to actively alter the way we define things for ourselves and explain things to ourselves. Just like we haven't, we were born, nobody taught us how to lift weights. We had to go to the gym and be taught, okay, nobody was born able to lift weights and build muscles. Nobody was born like this. Now, some people were born in situations where they had to use their body in a certain way that they actually built muscle naturally, but that doesn't happen very often. So the majority of people who do have a good shape in the modern world are the ones who have gone to the gym, who have learned how to, lift weight and to exercise with the help of a trainer. And then they've practiced it again and again until it became a habit. And now they have, they're in great shape. The exact same thing happens to emotional resilience in that nobody is born with it. I mean, some people are really born like that by nature, by genes, perhaps, but the majority of people who are emotionally resilient, they had to learn the same way we learn how to lift weight and to exercise in the gym. They had to learn to alter the way they, tell things to themselves. And a great example is like, the bus theory. For example, if you feel like you just got rejected by, I don't know, a client, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, or something like this, you could say like, oh my goodness, I lost everything and I'll be alone. Or you can say, well, clients slash partners slash opportunities slash businesses are like buses. When one goes, another comes. So let's move on to the next bus, right? This is exactly the same situation, but you have to learn this because ultimately by nature, we are not taught the importance of thinking this way. And our brains, because we have basically been, as we mentioned a few times throughout our podcast, our brain has evolutionarily been wired to live in a 50% society, 50 to about 120, 130 people society. So our brains are extremely sensitive about the other people's attitude, because if something went wrong in the tribe of 100 people, then the rest of the people for the rest of our lives would knew what happened then, and we would be very, very upset. But our brain is not capable of understanding what it means to live in a world with 7 billion people. You understand that right now, as we're talking right now, Pujix, you and I don't even have the time to say hi to all the people around the world. By the time we want to actually reach them, we probably have, we are not 100 years old or something like this, because there are so many people on the planet right now that you don't even have time to say hi to all of them, right?
Wow.
Even on social media, there are that many people right now. And because the brain doesn't understand abundance, then of course, by practicing these, ways of thinking, you can teach yourself how to think abundance in every way. And that will then, of course, allow you to be emotionally resilient and to feel almost no stress, sometimes even like feeling good. Because let's be honest, when you know that no one's rejection, no loss or failure can actually make you upset, this kind of, give you a very good feeling. It's kind of like a superpower, if you will, because a lot of people don't have it. And once this happens, not only you will not get upset, you actually feel great about the fact that this doesn't upset you, and this creates a positive circle where you actually get more and more positive feedback because of your expectations, right? And this is exactly what I mean by emotional resilience, is that you change the way you all basically talk to yourself and explain things to yourself, and that will then allow you to not be emotionally affected whatsoever by the tough things in your environment. And that, of course, requires a lot of practice. It is not necessarily a natural way to think, but if you learn it, it'll give you a huge advantage in almost every area of your life.
All right, that's awesome. Now, I got 2 points that I want to talk to you about. Now, one of them was inherent in your conversation a little. So you mentioned that with a rejection, you might think, what? So what? That person thinks that I don't worth his time. Well, that's his problem. Now, although true, that will require for you to actually do believe in your abilities and be confident enough that you feel like, yeah, I got this. There's no problem. And now, although we have talked about self-confidence in the past, I'm just want to, as a segue for a person who hasn't really listened to that episode whilst listening to this. Now, what if that person actually is not sure? Like, although there are plenty of other people, but would it matter if I'm not actually worthy of any of them? Now, what do you say to that kind of mindset?
Such a great question. First of all, you're absolutely right, because most of us, we don't come out just believing in ourselves and abilities. And I'm also against fake confidence, as we discussed in our last episode, which was a solo round, basically. So I don't here say that people should be delusional, okay? But what I'm really saying is, people who tend to feel like that oftentimes are people who have not received any positive feedback. So the key to success is to persist until you get some sort of real feedback that is positive, that tells you you were right. So, for example, the same person who, let's say the client just reacted to him and he feels worthless, like he feels like his idea doesn't matter at all, right? In that situation, the only reason the person can truly believe that he's good is if he had some sort of positive result in the past. Now, here's a problem. What if he's just getting started and he's never had any positive feedback? What if this guy who
Precisely.
thinks he's cool has never had the real experience? In that case, what this gentleman or what this lady needs to do is to actually persist long enough and use what I call the numbers game until he or she gets the kind of positive result that tells him or her that, yes, I finally got something. Why? Because the subconscious mind needs some sort of results to believe that you're cool. If you really believe that you're the best salesperson in the world and you've never sold anything in your whole life, then probably you're deluding yourself. If you think that you are a cool guy, that every girl will be glad to be with you, but you're a virgin, I'm sorry, maybe you're really deluding yourself, right? So ultimately, it comes down to getting some sort of results, right? Whether it's to keep persisting until you find, for example, a girlfriend, whether it's you keep persisting until you make a sales or until you get the results or until you learn that language or until you, I don't know, learn the skill or you make that business successful. Ultimately, here, the way to gain that level of belief in yourself is to keep persisting and using the numbers game. And well, the number game basically is about going through the funnel of life. Everything in life goes through a funnel. And this funnel basically simply says that if you, for example, were to sell one item, you have to go through what we call the 80-20 and then the 80-20 of the 80-20. So, for example, let's say that I want to sell a pair of glasses. And this, if I show this pair of glasses to about, let's say, 10 people, for example, I can expect about 2 of those 10 people, or 20%, to actually show some interest. And I should expect that about 8 out of 10 simply will ignore my offer and walk away. And then the other step is, from those people who looked at it, I can expect 20% of them to actually go and buy it right off the bat, right here and there, right? And we call this the 4%. Persisting long enough, if you keep calling enough clients, if you somehow do some other things. Hello?
Yep, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yep.
So if you do a lot of these things, and if you focus your attention on getting the results, then eventually you get some kind of feedback that is positive. And only then your subconscious mind will finally believe. He says, like, yeah, actually, you were right. Because if I was truly worthless, then how come I just got a business right now? I just got an order, man. If my product or service was worthless, then why do I have an order? So I'm not basically a piece of shit. My product or service is not a piece of shit. It is worthy, and here's a proof. And once you get the proof, now you are one step closer to that level of I don't care. So you keep persisting, and this time maybe 200 clients reject you, but you remember that, listen, man, I got one order. If I got one, I can get 2. So you keep persisting, and then you get, boom, eventually you get your second order. And now you are 2 times as certain about your value than you were the first time, right? And then you keep persisting. And of course, eventually over time, you start through the process of the numbers game by going through large numbers, what basically Grant Cardone says 10xing things, by, let's say, 10xing the number of phone calls that you make, or by 10xing your presentations, or by 10xing the times that you actually, I don't know, swipe yes on your Tinder or whatever it is. By doing these things certain amount of time, eventually, by the law of 80-20, you will get some positive feedback. And every additional success or positive feedback will then reinforce your sense of belief in yourself. And that will then make it a lot easier to be emotionally resilient, because now, anytime you hear bad stuff, anytime, I don't know, a client says no, or a girl says no, or I don't know, a boy says no, or it'll say a bank says no, you simply say, well, I know I'm the shit, so probably it's the wrong bank or it's the wrong client, right? And then you keep persisting. And that is why you can actually build through authentic acquisition of real results over time by tapping the power of the large numbers.
All right, that was very good. Thank you for that. Now, let me tell you something that personally bothers me a lot, and those are the situations that I'm in a position of weakness. What that is what I define weakness essentially is that situations that there are so little I can do or could have done, that basically the situation was really out of my hand, and not only out of my hand, there's not much I can do to fix it. There's not much I could have done to prevent it. So essentially, I'm like spectator watching a goddamn movie that is not to my liking, and I'm forced to watch it. I hate those situations, and I cannot control myself in those situations for the most part. And I need a bit of time to grapple with it.
That's right.
So, what would your point of view be on such situations?
Well, first of all, that's a great point. I think here implementing some rationality can really help us, because if you really don't have any choice in something and you have no ability to exert force and power, then the chances are you should not probably be so attached to that outcome anyways. So in such situations, I have this basically philosophy, we call it the businessman's philosophy. And it says, and they ask a businessman, why don't you look out the window when they're, imagine like a businessman is right now flying on an airplane, and they ask him, so Mr. Businessman, why don't you look out of the window of the airplane? And he says, well, because I can't control the airplane. What's the point of looking outside the window, right? Now, here what I'm saying is there are things in life you can control, and there are things in life that you cannot control. And even in situations that you think you have no control, you always have a sense of control, and that is simply by removing yourself from that situation. So you always have that control. And whenever you say, I feel in certain situations very helpless, I really think that that stems from a belief system that tells you that you have no choice, because I believe that we always have some degree of control in anything. So long as you're alive, you will have some degree of control on whatever it is that you're doing. And the very least of which is to simply refuse to move on with that situation. You always have that choice. So the whole belief in that there is no choice or there is no way out, I'm strictly against this belief, because it's just a belief. It's nothing more than that. And if you believe that, of course, it becomes a reality. So I personally never live with the idea that there's no there's nothing I can do about it. Number one. Number two, even if it is really something that you have really no control over, let's say, I don't know, the results of the football match. For example, Jets, right. They lost a while back. It was a very terrible defeat for the Jets, which is one of my favorite teams. And it was a very terrible defeat, let's be honest. And at that time, you could be very upset as a fan, like, oh my gosh, the Jets lost. It was really fucked up, all those things. Or you can simply say, well, I don't really care that much because I was not the player. Maybe if I was the player, I would get a better result. I believe that either you can do something about a situation or you can't. And if you can't do something about it, then the chances are you should not at all be attached to the outcome. And in most cases in life, you do have a choice. I really believe that. So, for example, earlier you mentioned about, not having a choice. I mentioned about this client that you're working with. You really need the money and you really want to work with this person, but he is acting this way and you cannot control that person's behavior. Now, of course, if you know about negotiation tactics, you know that there are certain ways that you can actually influence a person. But even if you are not aware in that regard, what you can do is simply call on more clients and build, a larger clientele base. And trust me, you will feel helpless. Understand that's a belief system that is telling you that you have no other choice and that you got to put up with this. And I myself have a very different belief system. My rule is simple. Never put up with anything. I repeat, never put up with anything. If you don't like something, express it directly. Everybody knows me. Everybody who works with me, everybody who knows me, who's been around me, my friends in my business, my team, my secretaries, they know that if I don't like something, I will tell them directly that I don't like it. Or if I don't tell them directly, my behavior will show that I don't like it. Why? Because you're not supposed to put up with anything. We're supposed to have harmonious relationships with those around us. And if they don't know our rules, then of course, we're going to have problems. So the whole idea, the whole victim mindset that is unfortunately very popular these days, thanks to, the new culture of spectarism and all those things, has made us believe that perhaps there's no choice. There are things in life you can't. But I simply come from a belief system that says there's always a choice and there's always something you can do. And I myself never put up with anything that I don't like. I will simply work harder and create new options. If you don't like the things, the way your client talks to you, just hang up on him and never call him again. Let's see what happens. If you don't like the way your boyfriend is treating you, then simply, dump your boyfriend and, be active, be socially active until some other guy comes and offers you a date. The point is, in reality, you want to actually create options for yourself in life and know that you always have a choice. And thinking that you are helpless or you have no choice is just a belief system that oftentimes is rooted in laziness and lack of drive and ambition for taking massive 10x actions. Because once you take 10x actions in anything, you will never feel that you have to put up with anything.
That's such a good point, and you're absolutely right. Makes sense. You always have a choice. If you think to yourself, "Oh, I'm not going to dump my boyfriend because then I don't have a boyfriend," then you made a choice.
Exactly. I'll be a lone single girl for like 2. No, of course you do have a choice. You can go on Tinder now and have thousands of guys, checking you out all the time. If you're a guy, you can just go talk to girls. If you're in business, you can just start calling. The answer is 10x. If you don't like the way things are, I mean, a while ago, I was talking to one of my friends. And in certain countries, and these guys have serious financial problem. I say, what the fuck are you doing in that country? Just leave the fucking country and go somewhere else.
Right.
Well, it's very difficult. I should first get, this document and all. Okay, that's your problem. Sorry, goodbye. Because if you are not willing to put in the 10x effort, then you should sit there and feel helpless. But you always have a choice.
And that's a choice too.
Well, okay, if I want to do this, then I have to put this and maybe that. Dude, 10x your action and your effort, and you will find new options and new choices. And once you have them, trust me, you will never feel helpless again, and you will not put up with anything, because you know that I can now put up with the bad behavior of my boyfriend, for example, or my girlfriend, or I can talk to 10 times more boys and girls until I find the guy that exactly suits me, or a girl that exactly suits me. I can talk right now to 100 new clients and hopefully get 2 more new clients, or I can put up with my shitty client who's always late on payments and who doesn't basically send the orders on time, right? So ultimately, the key to all of that is 10xing your effort and increasing your options. Once you do that, you will never feel helpless again.
Yeah, and you bear the pain for the moment, but you know that there's a lesson coming from it, and you can not bear that pain anymore in your life. That's a good point. That's a very good point. And now I want to be mindful of your time. So if you have anything that we left out that you want to talk about, please do.
For sure. Well, I want to thank you so much for this great topic. You asked some great questions, and I hope that our listeners will also find them useful. Ultimately, today we talked about emotional resilience and what it really means. And we defined it as the ability to not feel any emotional pain in situations where things are tough. And if we do feel emotional pains, they're not so much to the point where they actually make us dysfunctional. So we can actually feel those pains and still be functional and keep working and keep moving towards our next goals. And we mentioned that becoming emotionally resilient actually is not necessarily a natural thing. We have to learn to become emotionally resilient through practice. And that practice requires us to alter the way we talk to ourselves and ultimately become very detached to the outcome of any one particular situation or person or event or whatever. And to do so, we need options. You cannot be detached from the outcome if there's only one thing that you want, and that one thing is determined by one person. In that case, of course, you'll feel very, very bad. Of course, you'll feel very dependent. And of course, you feel like hell. But if what you want could be found in the hands of 20 people and you've already talked to 5 of them, then of course, you will not feel so much attached to the outcome anymore. It's just natural. You don't even feel it. So part of that self-explanatory style is actually get good results, because you cannot believe in your values and your goodness unless and until you get good results. And how do you get good results? We mentioned earlier, playing the numbers game. You 10x, your effort. You 10x the number of people you talk to, or the projects you actually try to attempt, or the business you want to go for, or whatever it is. And then eventually through the numbers game, just through the numbers game, eventually you're going to get your first positive result, which is going to reinforce your belief. And once you can do this process, eventually you're going to get the second and the third and the fourth, and this keeps going on and on like this. And eventually you feel like, dude, I just got rejected by 2,000 clients, but I made 20 sales worth of, $1 million. That's awesome. Let's get going, man. And now all of a sudden you feel great. It's like a game. It's like, okay. So Brian Tracy says, like, every time, that's what he taught in one of his business seminars. He said, every time a client says no to me, I hear money dinging in my case, like jinging. Like every time a client says no, Brian Tracy says, that's money right there. That's money in the piggy jar right here. And he visualizes like an auditory. He feels that every single no, that's a little bit of a money that he's putting until the next line says yes, and boom, he's got all the project, right? So this mindset of putting the numbers game and persisting eventually make you emotionally resilient, because you know that at some point you're going to get the results. And once you do that, then you become a lot more basically happy with your life and a lot less attached to the outcome of any one interaction with any one person. And once you do that, you then live with what we call freedom and happiness, which, as we mentioned earlier, were the foundations, freedom and independence, which were the foundations for true self-esteem. And once you have that, of course, life gets a lot better. So generally, if you want to be emotionally resilient, understand that like all things in life, nothing that I teach here in our podcast with you or on social media is ever easy. I'm not a fan of hoo-hoo, change your mind, take a deep breath. I don't know, say five. I'm not a fan of any of this bullshit because none of that actually really works. What they do actually change your state temporarily, and then you're going to get back to your same shitty mental state. So what I'm a fan of is practical results and getting results, and that's not easy. It is not easy to go to 1,000 clients and be told all the bad things until one person buys your product. It's not easy. It is not easy to be told no, or I have a boyfriend, or I'm a lesbian, or I don't date guys like you 700 times until you get, I don't know, that supermodel, for example, right? It's not easy. It's not easy to be told no after no after no by banks after banks after banks until finally one bank gives you the loan. It's not easy to keep losing your effort and not seeing any results after years. But ultimately, these things are not easy. But let's be honest, success isn't easy either. Happiness also is not easy. I mean, you have to work at it, right? It's hard work. And once you get into that habit, eventually you have the right mindset that allows you to persist in tough times, and then you will not feel the emotional pain that most people feel when things don't go their way.
It's not easy. Love it. It reminds me of that saying, nothing worth having comes easy. Very
Absolutely.
True.
And what we're talking about here right now are the things that are truly worth having, like happiness, success, peace of mind, self-esteem, and a sense of autonomy, freedom, and independence. I mean, we have this actually in Washington, D.C. Freedom is not free. You got to work for freedom.
Very true. And now I think we've said everything. I think we've said all we needed to say. And with that, I want to thank you, as always.
My pleasure, buddy. Great show, as always. You're a great producer. Appreciate all the effort you're putting in. And hopefully, because of your effort, we can actually serve our listeners.
Thank you very much. That is the hope. I hope we are of service. And thank you guys, as always, for joining us, listening to us, and for your feedbacks and questions. It's awesome. Keep them coming. Until later episode, have a good one.